Right, we're going live here. All right, quiet on the set, folks. Good morning, everyone. We're here in Lancaster, New Hampshire at Crane's Snowmobile Museum, and we are simulcasting in 8 different places on Facebook and YouTube. We're going to pan across the museum here. We're going to meet some good friends who are going to tell us about the upcoming induction ceremony for the Eastern Snowmobile Racing Hall of Fame. And these are probably all familiar faces to you. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. Morning, Mike.
Yeah, take it away, guys.
Why don't you start, man? You're the man. Yeah, you started it off. This is your
September
baby.
11th coming up is going to be our 5th induction, and we're inducting 5 more pioneers of the sport of snowmobile racing, and it's going to start at 1:30 in the afternoon, so it'll give people a chance to catch lunch. Bring a folding chair. We have plenty of room to sit and enjoy the afternoon. And then after we have our induction, the Lancaster Motel is inviting us down to the historic Lancaster Motel for the after party. And the Lancaster Motel was the headquarters of the Grand Prix back during the day. So it's going to be quite an afternoon, and Paul and I are looking forward to it. And Bruce here, Bruce Beauregard is on the board, as well as Paul and I, and we're really looking forward to this induction.
It's all right.
That's the dog.
Can you bleep that now, Mike, or is it too late?
No, we can't now. In editing, I can. But we've got 27 people viewing live, and that'll only grow.
Okay.
But go ahead, guys.
So you got any questions for us, or?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about racing history. I know on the stage here we've got Bruce Beauregard. He won the Kilkenny Cup, I think, in 1975. Any stories or memories about that we want to share?
Well, I only want to say that I always took me a class to go out and get my sled running the way I wanted for the final.
Yeah.
And I didn't do as well that year in 440, which the sled was. I always did better in 650. And I discussed that with Herb Yancey about the setup. And Herb had a 340 mod, and he set up with his 340 mod. And in 650, he had his act together.
Yeah.
And he was a tough guy to beat. Well, I did very well. I didn't beat those guys all the time, but my 440 was usually 3rd behind Chip Elwood and Herb Yancey.
Sure.
But that year was my year, and I won mod 4 in 650 with the 440.
Nice.
I didn't do well with the 440 and the 440, but I did well in the 650.
Nice.
So I won't forget it, and that was my only Kilkenny Cup. I still wonder why I didn't win it in 73 when I won, always was 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in A and B stock with the 250 LT grade.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I did a little homework over the last couple of days since the passing of Yvonne,
Sure.
who I met in 73.
Yeah.
And he won mod 1. He won mod 2 at the 73 Lancaster Grand Prix.
Yeah.
And I probably should have spent less time talking to Yvonne and working on my stuff. So I can't find any results from Bruce Beauregard in 1973 at the Kilkenny Cup.
Sure.
Lancaster Grand Prix.
It's good you had a chance to spend some time with
I
him.
met Yvonne and his wife, Marie.
Wow. And the last name is Duhamel, right?
Duhamel.
Yeah.
He's from Quebec.
Yeah.
And I got to meet him all over again in 2019 at
Yeah.
the Ormstown, Quebec National Show. He was there for the unveiling of the restoration of the XR2.
Yeah.
That he set a world's record in Boonville, New York, and I think it was in 1972. 127.3 miles an hour. He won set the record for snowmobile.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's insanely
So
fast.
he just deceased at 81
Yeah.
2 days ago. And so in 2019, he was 79 and he still had his wits about him. And I showed a picture of him and his wife that were taken in Lancaster at the Grand Prix in
Wow.
1973. A little photo that I had saved of a bunch of people,
Yeah.
including Conrad Rollins and Charlie Lofton from Arctic.
Yeah.
Those are pictures that I found that I had.
Wonderful. No, go ahead.
Our Kilkenny Cup, the names on that cup read like the Hall of Fame out in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Every big name snowmobile racer back, you know, the first generation raced at the Lancaster Grand Prix. Lancaster was the Grand Prix, I think, was probably the first Eastern race in this area. It started in 1962. Paul Crane here was on the JCs, and he and several other young men at that time put the snowmobile race. It was the first organized snowmobile race in New England.
In New England, wow.
Yeah, and in 1964, Timberland Machines manager Bob Bottoms came up with the name of the Grand Prix for Lancaster's bicentennial. Lancaster was celebrating their bicentennial that year, and they put on a winter carnival, and the Grand Prix was part of the winter carnival.
Yeah.
And so the name stuck, and it was the Grand Prix from then on until 1977 was the last event. And every factory, every big name factory team came here. Snowjet, Yamaha, Arctic Cat, Polaris, Skidoo, they were all here racing at the Grand Prix. And in 1974, well, in the fall of 73, we had a gas shortage. And the board members of the Grand Prix decided that they would cancel the race for 74 because of the gas shortage. It was the biggest mistake they ever made, because in 74, Bangor now had our weekend. We weren't going to race, so they grabbed our weekend. Well, guess what happened in 1974? Snowpro.
Oh, yeah.
Snowpro went to Bangor.
So now you've got a
So
conflict.
we lost a lot of our thunder,
Yeah,
by not having the race in 1974.
sure.
Because our weekend, our date, was the weekend that all the factory teams from the Midwest came out here.
And they're all up in Bangor now.
And they didn't change that weekend for us.
Sure.
So they continued from then on, going to Bangor. They saw the RXL in 1977.
Yeah.
I went and watched that at Bangor. And so, yeah, Lancaster lost a lot of their thunder. One thing that can be said, though, is in 1976, Gilles Villeneuve came here with that IFS group, and he cleaned up in every class that he raced in. And so, and he debuted that sled here.
Wow, debuted it here.
Yeah,
in Lancaster.
76.
Nice.
And at that time, Bob Eastman and Wes Pesic from the Polaris factory came out because they heard about this sled. So they came here at the Grand Prix and watched him go while they're in the stands. And Eastman, seeing how that sled went, he knew that there was something special.
Yeah.
So he called up the guy by the name of Gordon Rudolph, who was experimenting with IFS sleds. He was experimenting with the old 1972 Chaparral setup. And so Bob Eastman knew that he was quite familiar with that type setup. So he hired him on in the summer of 1976. And they came up with that little RXL in 1977. And I mean, we know the history of that.
That was a good year.
And you know, today, what snowmobile doesn't have an IFS suspension?
Yeah, that's standard today.
It's all standard.
Yeah.
They did away with the leafer. I mean, the only time you see leafers now is vintage racing.
Yeah.
And but you know, the history of Lancaster being, and we had Chaparrals racing here in '72.
Yeah.
They didn't do very well because that type suspension was designed more for ice racing than it was for snow racing.
Yeah.
So here's Louis Lunn on a '72 Chaparral IFS, and he's pounding on the high banks with it. It just that setup was not designed for pounding on the high banks.
Yeah.
And when they started going to ice, like in '74, '75, you know, now Gordon Rudolph and Gilles Villeneuve figured out that, hey, you know, this IFS is working pretty good on ice.
Yeah, that caught on.
And it caught on.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
In the early years, we had snow. I mean, I look back today and at the, you know, Connecticut and Pennsylvania, and look at how many races were held, and they don't even get snow anymore. I mean, we've had years where we didn't have much snow up here. So, like Minge was saying, before this ice racing stuff, I used to say that the banks were 20 feet high. They used to plow the tracks.
Yeah.
And we had, you know, 200 or 300 inches of snow a year.
Yeah, early
This is like Tug
70s.
Hill, New
We
York,
had a lot of
okay?
snow in the early
The
70s.
elevation. And these guys, we didn't have studs, we didn't have carbides, and we started welding files and getting stuff on an angle and put some bolts in. And we used to ride around the track on the top of the rim, because if you went over, you were out of the race. But there's no way you could stay down low.
Sure, you kind of work the bank.
You worked the
Yeah.
bank, and you could, you know, as long as you could hang on as fast as you could and hold on at every bounce, make it for 5 laps, you were doing okay. And the guys that had the technology, that have the hardware, if you will, to start running down low inside, like the Trap Brothers did with the Yamahas in '71. And they had bogey wheels, and everybody else had sliders. But when those little Yamahas pulled in the pits, they covered them up. They didn't want you to see what was underneath.
Yeah, nice.
And all they were was bogey wheels. But boy, they kept it a secret, and they won first, second, third, fourth, and fifth place in the classes, and they did that all year.
Nice.
And that year, Mike Trapp won the World's Championship on a 433 Yamaha
Wow.
at Eagle River.
With those bogey wheels.
It's the same setup. And then a year later, he won it again in 1972 on the 643 Yamaha. 71 was on methanol. 1972,
Yeah.
we all went back to available pump gasoline.
Sure. Now, what year did Yamaha switch to slide suspension?
I don't know.
Not sure.
I'm not
It must have been
Yamaha.
shortly after that, right?
It could have been right around that time.
Sure.
Because I think those small blizzards early on, the little blizzards had the Elans anyway.
They had little
They had the
sliders.
little sliders.
They
Yeah.
were flexible. The slide rails on those.
Two sections.
No,
Two
they
sections.
got 2 seconds.
They flex.
You know, I gotta tell you, during snow racing, here at the Grand Prix, it inevitably would rain, right, Paul?
Oh, yes.
We'd always get a warm spell just before the Grand Prix. We called it the January thaw.
Yeah.
And it would melt all of the snow on the track up there, and then it would turn cold, and it would, you know, then it would freeze over. So inevitably, the track itself was ice. So the poor guys with the motor skis and the Arctic Cats and the Polaris's with the cleats, they didn't have a chance on that track.
Yeah.
The only ones that did well on the ice was the Skidoo with a rubber track, the Yamaha with a rubber track. Rubber tracks were the best setup to go around the inside of those tracks. Otherwise, the cleats were like skates. If you didn't stud them, they'd slide
Slide right off,
sideways,
yeah.
and, you know, you'd pull pinwheels all day long. So they ended up having to race on the high bank. And yeah, I mean, it was not good for the cleated tracks back then.
And one of the first forms of making a sled to be able to handle and turn in the front were called pizza cutters. And you bolted them on with 4 bolts,
A little disc.
and you put them
Yeah.
both on the left side of the
Wheels.
ski if you were going left, and they had a little wheel. And like the thing they used to cut pizza in the pizza shop.
Right.
Some of them do this for pizza. And if you had pizza cutters, man, this was the latest thing in technology back in the early 70s.
Pizza cutters and stone bolts.
Yeah.
Put stone bolts in the
State of the art, baby.
They weren't good for the first 3 laps.
Woody's hadn't been invented.
Sure. Free Woodies.
I was trying to think, it was one of those pizza wheels.
I think you did have one.
I had one, I think I took them off.
Yeah.
Stepped down onto the
Yeah,
floor.
scratching your floor with it, yeah.
But one of the things I wanted to ask about while we're doing this, just a mile or 2 from here is the location where the first ski-doos were imported into the U.S. and dealers were set up all across the Northeast, I think, from that location. You guys want to talk about any memories of that, or?
Paul hired Bert Moore.
Yeah, I hired Bob Bottoms and I hired Bert Moore. Bert and I were real good friends. I introduced him and he did the trucking from Valcourt for all the industrial bombardiers and Muskegs and J5s. And then he started hauling this snow machines, the Skidoos. That was back in 1979. 59, he started hauling all that stuff. down.
1959. Wow.
Yeah. And he's, in the first skidoos, he brought one down after Bob Bottoms and I went up in 1958. And I rode on the prototype down Belcourt to the machine shop. My boss, Bob Bottoms, and because I was the only employee other than Bert getting equipment at this time. And Armin Bombardier was on one side of the sled, and I was on the sled, and it had the wagon had this long wood skis, but it had a rod across, and it had like lawnmower wheels on it, and I rode it down the gravel road.
Wow.
That was in '58.
Wow.
Then I think it was December 5th of '59, we brought in serial number 22. It was the first one in the United States. And that was through Timberland Machine, which Wes was the owner of it. They had 3 other shops up in Ontario. They had serial number 7, 17, 18, and 19, I believe, that were up in Canada.
Wow.
Yeah, they were one of the first ones that got the sleds.
The very first canoe that came in the United States was 6022.
Yeah, 60.
Yeah.
Two,
then-
two.
And
Yeah,
Paul is the first American to ride a Bombardier canoe.
Yes, in the U.S. and Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I
You
mean,
saw it here, folks.
and it revolutionized snowmobiling. I mean, let's face it, either, if you're not a Skidoo fan, that's fine. But that Bombardier Skidoo, that one-piece chassis with the engine in front, you're sitting on a seat over the track with your feet on a running board. What snowmobile today, even though you have
Yeah.
long travel suspension,
I'm going to do a pan across. Just about every snowmobile in here has that
sled
format.
today is not built on that Bombardier design.
Just about every sled in here has that
Not
format.
every sled in here. So you don't have to be a Skidoo fan to realize that that little Skidoo revolutionized recreational snowmobiling here in America and everywhere around the world.
That was a game changer.
It was a definite game changer. And this gentleman right here to my left is the guy that rode one first.
That's amazing.
In 1961, Bob Bottoms and I, there was an Arctic Cat, the Model 100. They went over to the Mount Washington auto road over there. And they were going to display them. And we had brought the Skidoo over there, and the Arctic Cat just wouldn't go where the Skidoo was on the side of the hill over there at the Glen House.
Yeah.
Just wouldn't go.
No contest, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
But we've trying them Skidoos out in 1961 mainly, was the one that we rode a lot.
Yeah.
Brought it to ski areas and everything, and I had an awful experience in Cannon Mountain down there. Of course, back then there's no brakes.
Yeah.
And got up on the mountain a long ways, and to turn it around when you're on a slope that's
You get pointed down
more
and
than 45
Eesh.
degrees. And you got on it, and all of a sudden, it's a boulder about 12 feet wide and high in the middle of the ski area. I don't mind saying I got off the sled and the sled went down.
Wow. Did the sled hit the boulder?
No.
No, it went around, it missed it. Wow.
I didn't want to stay on it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's basically a runaway toboggan at that point. There's no controlling it.
Years ago, we'd be up in Phillipsbrook and out on the road here in front of the Catholic Church in the field, and people would stop and look and wonder what the track was. And I've been up in places back in '61 where you've never been a snow machine, and it's really was something.
Yeah.
Up in Phillipsbrook, and they were cutting pulp, and the pulp piles were 20 feet high and wide right up on the pulp piles.
What amazed me was back when they first came to town, just a handful of people that had them at the time. And out here in front of the Catholic Church is a white steel fence that runs along the sidewalk. And just the other side of that fence, there's a bank about like this, about that steep. And what amazed me, I was just a kid, is how those skidoos would stay on that bank. They'd come up across that field wide open, and they'd come up that bank, and then they'd come all the way around like that and back down. And what kept them from flopping over, because I didn't know anything about centrifugal force at that time. Like Daytona, if you're not doing 75 miles an hour on the high bank at Daytona, you're gonna fall off.
Yeah.
That's the same way with this. They had to be going fast enough so that they could stay on that high bank. And really, it was amazing to watch when I was a kid, because I had never seen anything like that.
Yeah. Well, circling back to that, what with those first few snowmobiles that you brought to Lancaster, the random people that were bystanders to see that, what were their impressions of that? What were they thinking, and what were they saying?
Just mainly it was, I had one, and Bill Doolin and Bill Fish had one, but he had nobody riding it, so Bill did. It was mainly Bill Doolin and I with the 71s. 61, yeah, going around town.
Yeah.
We did some foolish things that I wouldn't say.
Sure. A young man's got to experiment.
I went with Curly Whipple up in the Phillips Brook. He wanted to beaver trap. He was a trapper.
He was a trapper.
And we went up there. Of course, it's about 8 to 10 miles up in there on a snow machine, and we found tracks on snowshoes where other people had gone up to trap and everything. But we were up in there trying to find a lot of things. We got the Devil's Washbowl and everything. Tried coming out, and on these canoes they had three dogs or four dogs. They're little loops like they still have on some of the newer sleds.
Yeah.
We lost one of them. And I tell you, the clutch don't open up very good. So we went to believe it or not, I found it laid on the snow machine. And I found it, we had not too much tools, but somehow we got the clutch off, and went one of the logging camps there and got a piece of wire and wired it so it would open up a little bit. But it took us quite a while to get home.
Yeah. Jury rigging the clutch.
You never left back then without a pair of snowshoes on your snowmobile.
Yeah.
It was
And some tools. Yeah.
Spark plug.
Spark plug.
Totally.
How many spark plugs?
Yeah, half a dozen at least.
Belts.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Used to go through belts. Yeah.
We weren't famous for saving belts or spark plugs.
Yeah.
Not that reliable.
I'm a lot younger than Paul, but I remember our family's first skidoo was 1968. And I think I had 3 brothers. My mother and father didn't have anyone. And somehow I convinced my father to buy a skidoo. 1968 Super Olympic 16 horse from a dealer out of Manchester, New Hampshire that sold bicycles. Now it was a skidoo dealer.
No.
Wow.
And I think the snowmobile was $875 brand new. And actually, these gentlemen will know what year, but originally they were called Ski Dog. And Skidoo, because of the emblem, the decal, they changed it to Ski-Doo because it blocked the G on dog. Am I correct?
Yes.
But
Yeah,
anyway,
I've heard that.
So that was the beginning of my racing career. So I said to my father, I said, "Can I race it?" "What are you going to do?" I said, "Well, there was a local winter carnival hooked in New Hampshire. And I did something to the exhaust system, and I did something to the carburetor, and no studs, no carbides, a helmet. I think we had just a Bell-like helmet back then.
Yeah.
No shields, no anything, maybe goggles. And the very first 2 races that I entered in my life, I got a first place.
Wow.
So that was the beginning.
Off to a good start.
I was bit.
Yeah.
And Dad, our family snowmobile is no longer a family snowmobile. It is my race sled
Yeah.
from 1968.
Nice.
I ended up racing cat for my career, and was very successful. And my underwear was either purple or green
Nice.
and black. And I can tell you that today, my latest snowmobile was a 2020 Skidoo. And so I guess my story is I started out on Skidoo, and I'm going out on Skidoo.
Circling back. Yeah.
So Skidoo in the United States or in snowmobiling, and I've been on the antique Polarises up on the top of Mount Washington. And I've ridden a lot of different varieties, but I started on a Skidoo and I'm ending on it.
But he still has that Arctic cat that he won the Grand Prix in 1975.
Wow, that was in here for a while.
Yeah, it was in here for a
It's at your
while.
house now?
It will be here, it will be here at the induction.
Oh, good.
And I raced it in the seniors class about 5 or 6 years ago at 68. And then I could only run a 340 in the seniors class. So I changed the motor over and the engine. And then when I removed it from here to go to the Lowville National Show in 2019, well, I actually had it, in
I
the
think it was 440 here.
no, they had the decal. It was a 340.
Okay.
So the national show here was what, 2015, 16? I entered it in that show as unrestored race, and I took a second place overall at the national show here.
Yeah. Nice.
That year, I wanted to put it back to the 440 Supermod, like it was when I won the Kilkenny Cup. I was able to get all brand new parts. I waited 2 years for the left cylinder, brand new. I found it. Everything in the motor is brand new. I built it. I had the machine work done by machine shop. I built the same pipes that Arctic Factory ran in 1975. Everybody had the same thing on Arctic Cat at the World Series.
Wow.
Weed split. I built the exact same duplicate things. I had to get a couple of parts from Herb Yancey, who had extras.
Yeah.
And then that sled went to the Lowville National Show, and I entered it in 2 classes. And the currently raced class, which I had just raced it as a 340, I took a 3rd place in the national show with that sled.
Wow.
And so it's back to 440. It's back to the best that it gets with the 77 suspension. And I had to convert it to a rubber track because the rules now in the insurance companies don't allow cleated tracks.
No cleats, huh?
So I had to put a special track on it that was longer than the original Z track. I put a 77 Z suspension in it. They came from Mike Smith from Alaska, and a loop system and all the other tricks and bells and everything to run it in like it was in the day.
Yeah.
I'm talking him into putting his stock exhaust system back on it and running it into the vintage rides that we have, like the one in Franconia.
Sure.
And then Ray Lacasse is doing that one up in
Pittsburgh, yeah.
Hey, the sled that won the 1975 Grand Prix with the original driver.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
you know what was weird that I'm thinking about it now? After Sunday, after the races, we all went to the awards and all that, and dinner and all that. And I don't know what happened to it, because things kind of moved around. 76, 77 was my last year. I got married, and things changed. I think it might have been the last year of the Grand Prix.
75, yeah.
And I never got to see my name on the Kilkenny Cup till like 45 years later. We were holding races in northern New Hampshire, where I lived. In Colebrook, Pittsburgh, and Arrow. We had a winter event at the 3 different venues. It was
2013.
And we had did that for 9 years because I belonged to the Snowmobile club up there. Because of my race experience, I volunteered as a tech inspector to help out at these fundraiser races for the local clubs. And all of a sudden, at one race in Pittsburgh, New Hampshire, somebody said, "There's a trophy over there with your name on it. It says something about Lancaster Grand Prix." And I went, and I'd never seen this trophy. It was in the back of a pickup truck. That's how big it is. And I went over. I said, "Wait a minute, Chet." I said, "I gotta go." I go, 1975. I go, that's me. That's my.
That was your first time to lay eyes on it.
45 years or whatever it was, 1975 to whatever, to see my name on the actual Kilkenny Cup. And when my mother passed away, we sold the house, and I had to clean out a bedroom upstairs. And the bedroom was full of trophies, full. I don't know how many there were in there, but it was full.
Yeah.
I hauled away pickup truck loads of trophies to a metal dumpster that a company that I flew for had a metal dumpster.
Yeah.
And I didn't think about it. I probably should have given them to the Special Olympics, but I kept, and I had the Pennsylvania Governor's Cup, and I had a lot of cups. So I did keep my Kilkenny Cup.
Yeah.
My little one from
Sure.
1975. And of course, my 2 World Series trophies from 1973, a first and a 4th.
Yeah.
So of all the trophies, so that we could sell my mother's house, I had to get rid of it.
Wow.
And my yellow bibs, they all went in the trash.
Wow.
And I kept I had six yellow bibs.
Wow.
I kept the World Series and the Kilkenny Cup. They meant the most to me.
Yeah, for sure.
Timmy White did the same thing. Timmy had a whole basement full of trophies, and he had one 4-footer, and I can't remember now what race it was. You know, if it was at the Bourbon Cup or Bangor, but it was a huge trophy.
I think it was at Wolfboro.
Maybe
The Hampshire
Wolfboro.
Grand Prix.
Anyway, he tossed them
The
all.
Hampshire
Oh.
Championship.
I said, Tim, the snowdrifters would have bought those
Yeah.
trophies.
Yeah.
You know,
Put them in the clubhouse or something.
never thought. No, they
Wow.
just tossed them.
Yellow bibs. I mean,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
who cared?
Yeah.
They were hung on the wall all.
And Paul did the same thing. Timmy White took a whole bunch of engines, Rotex parts, and just tossed them because he, you know, literally out
Taking
of
up
the snowmobile
space.
business. He didn't think they would be worth anything. I mean, nowadays, that's the reason why everything is so expensive to buy for these old parts, is because everybody just tossed them.
Yeah.
Paul threw a bunch of stuff underneath that foot thick slab down there in his other garage, just for Bill.
I had the pole barn, yeah.
Just dump them. Yeah.
Yeah. No one could have foreseen that there would be a revival and an interest in this.
No,
Yeah.
and,
And the only area with the town, of Timberland put over the dump in Lancaster.
oh, Timberland just dumped thousands of
Brand new
warranty cars
cars.
Oh, wow.
and tracks. And, yeah.
Dumped all of it.
tracks. Yeah.
Because
Wow.
this is probably the first time that some people may see this, I just want to make an acknowledgement that these two gentlemen are the brainchilds behind the Eastern Snowmobile Racing Hall of Fame.
Yes. And in case people are just joining us, we've been on here for a little while, which is fine. But in case people are just joining us, we're here to promote the induction ceremony, which is coming up in just a few weeks on September 11th. Do we want to do a quick pitch for that one more time while in case people are just joining us?
Yeah, please come, September 11th, we start at 1:30 in the afternoon, right here at Paul's Museum. We're gonna do an outside ceremony like we did last year. There's plenty of room, bring folding chairs and enjoy the day. We have 5 pioneer racers and promoters being inducted this year, and it's gonna be a great day. We're gonna
And-
put smiles on many faces.
Absolutely.
There'll
And-
be a lot of people that are in the Hall of Fame
Yeah,
at this,
Yes.
you'll see a lot of faces of people that have been inducted in the past, because this is like it's like a homecoming to these people. You know, it's like a family reunion
It
to
is.
these people, because they thought it was over. They went back to their day jobs after they were in the Monday morning papers. These people's names were in front page news during the wintertime up here in the snow belt.
Yeah, they were rock stars.
You know, they were rock stars. And all of a sudden it was over. Then they go back to their day jobs. They go back to their families. Now they're grandparents. And they thought we forgot this. We never forgot it. We never forgot that era. We waited for 50 years for the Midwest to recognize anybody out here from the East. And the only guy they recognized was Herb Yancey, and rightly so. Rightly so. But there's other people that we need to recognize in the East as well. And this is the reason why we're doing it. And there's a lot of these people that are up here now that are going to be here that you can meet. These people are the ones that you watched when you were young. The ones that you went to Bangor, you went to Wolfboro, you went to Laconia, you went to Lancaster, you went to Barre, Vermont, you went all over New England to watch these people race. And these are the ones that are here, you know, on the wall today. These are the ones that we recognize, the top Eastern pioneer racers of the first generation.
Yeah.
So September 11th, 1:30 here at the museum. Please come.
And in the back corner here, it has to be said, that is the Wall of Fame for the Hall of Fame.
That's right.
And that gray material there is covering the inductees who are going to be inducted here in just a few weeks.
Yeah.
And we invite you to come and join us. And like we've been saying, get here early so you can set up a lawn chair, stake out your spot, and also gives you a chance to come in here in the museum, take a look around. We're going to do
And
a
it's
pan
free.
today. It's
And it's
completely
free.
free. Yes. And like Midge was saying, you have a chance to mix and mingle with inductees, past, present, and future. And then, of course, there's the after party at the Lancaster Motel, which is just a short walk away. It's the event of the East. If you're into vintage snowmobiling and racing and all of that, it's a do not miss event. And we
can
invite
I
you
add one more thing?
by all means.
Please, whatever Mike LaPierre is selling, please buy it, because Mike LaPierre is one of the biggest promoters of this museum, of the Hall of Fame, and everything vintage snowmobile. So thank you, Mike, very much for what you're doing for us.
You're very welcome. I'm glad to do it. And back at you guys too. You guys are an endless source of quality content for all of my videos and pages and everything.
Glad to do it.
It's a wonderful collaboration we have.
It's a one hand washing the other hand.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Thank you.
And one other question I wanted to ask to Paul. I wanted to go back a little bit. We were talking about when you were setting up the dealers, the Ski-Doo dealers out of the location here in Lancaster. I was curious, how many dealers did you set up and in what states? And can you go into a little bit of a deep dive on some of that? Or?
Well, back in 1960, there wasn't too many set up that year, really, for as far as the dealer, because they had no sleds to put out.
Sure.
Because we only had the one 1960 sled
Yeah.
that came in, which we had. And in 61, I went around setting dealers up to 61. And the furthest I went setting them up was in Rangeley, Maine. But most of them were kind of hit the ones that
New Hampshire, Vermont.
New Hampshire and Vermont.
Sure.
How much was that first one? What did that sell for? What was the price on it?
Well, Bob Bottoms had a price of $1,050 on the first 1960.
Wow.
He couldn't sell it.
Wow.
He couldn't sell it. Red Parks had, what, a woodlot out east?
He couldn't sell it. They
Traded it for a woodlot.
Wow.
Think about it.
Yeah. Now, as we get into the mid 60s and into the 70s, early 70s, when it really started to explode, were you still setting up dealers, and did that footprint expand at all as far as the?
It really, dealer services went real well. People, once they started seeing it, especially in the 60s and 70s, and it really blossomed.
Really?
71, 72 was.
That's probably the peak of it, huh?
And you look at all these sleds here, most of them 71, 72.
They're not on the, speaking of expansion, on the racing end, 71, 72, 73, 74.
Yeah.
We've seen USSA in the East numbers as high as 5,000.
Wow.
So, I think Mod 1 and Mod 2 were the biggest classes back then. The amount of sleds in entries. And I can remember going to Syracuse, New York, the only race in the East that weekend. And I just ran A and B stock, and I think there was as many as, let's just say, 80 sleds in the class.
80 sleds. Wow.
We run heats, we run quarterfinals, we run semifinals, and then finals.
Wow.
But the biggest classes, and nothing to take away from the guys that ran the 650s and the 800s, but Mod 1 and Mod 2 were very competitive.
Wow.
Biggest entries, numbers wise.
Yeah, nice. And a crowd pleaser too, I'm sure.
Pardon me?
A crowd pleaser too, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. Well, the real crowd was usually the 800s, and then they eventually did away with. They started to do away with the bigger classes, the 800 class, the 650 class.
Sure.
And so and to watch the 800s when those guys are going, I mean,
That's intense.
they're like off the wall,
Yeah.
especially on the snowbanks.
Yeah. Well, cool. Yeah, let's wind it down, but I appreciate you guys doing this. And again, if you're just joining us, come and join us on September 11th, 1:30 p.m. for the Eastern Snowmobile Racing Hall of Fame induction ceremony. It's a wonderful time. And then there's it's here at Crane Snowmobile Museum, Lancaster, New Hampshire, right on Main Street. And then there's the after party at the Lancaster Motel. Thanks for viewing, and have a great day.